Divine guidance is one of the most profound gifts a believer can seek. It is the understanding that God, in His infinite wisdom, has a purpose for our lives that goes beyond our human comprehension. To acknowledge divine guidance is to surrender to the knowledge that the Creator of the universe, who knows every detail of our being, has already mapped out a path for us that is aligned with His will. The very act of seeking His guidance demonstrates our humility and trust in His sovereignty over all things. Life is full of choices, some small, some monumental. Every decision, whether it's choosing a career, making financial decisions, or simply deciding how to approach a relationship, can feel overwhelming. In moments like these, it's easy to feel lost or unsure of which way to go. However, when we seek divine guidance, we open ourselves to a higher source of wisdom and understanding. God, through His Holy Spirit, is always ready to lead us with a guiding hand, providing us with the discernment we need in all aspects of life. The Bible tells us that God is not only a creator, but also a counselor. In the book of Proverbs, we are reminded that God's wisdom is higher than our own understanding. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Proverbs 3 and 5. This verse highlights the importance of relying on divine guidance over our own limited perspective. While we may think we know what's best, God sees the bigger picture. His plans are not meant to harm us, but to prosper us. As Jeremiah 29:11 declares, this understanding should give us comfort, especially when we feel unsure or anxious about the direction our life is taking. Seeking divine guidance requires more than just asking God for help. It involves opening our hearts and minds to His presence, being still enough to hear His voice. Sometimes the answers aren't immediate, and sometimes they don't come in the form we expect. Yet, God's guidance often comes in gentle whispers, through a sudden peace that settles in our hearts, or through a word from the Bible that resonates deeply. It could even come through the counsel of others or through circumstances that seem to align perfectly. The key is to remain receptive to how God chooses to communicate with us. In moments of uncertainty, we must also remember that God does not just guide us in the big decisions, but also in the small moments of daily life. From the way we speak to others, to the choices we make in the quiet of our hearts, divine guidance is present in every aspect of our lives. God is with us, not just when we face monumental decisions, but also in our day-to-day living. His guidance is a constant presence, gently steering us towards His will. Ultimately, divine guidance calls us to walk by faith, not by sight. It challenges us to trust in a God who knows our hearts, our fears, and our desires, and who promises to lead us toward His purposes for our lives. When we lean into His wisdom and allow Him to direct our steps, we begin to see His handiwork in the seemingly small and ordinary moments. It is in these moments that we realize we are never alone on our journey, for His presence is always with us, offering the direction we need one step at a time. Trusting in God's plan is a concept that requires deep faith and a willingness to surrender our own desires to the will of the Creator. It's a powerful act of belief that, despite the uncertainties and challenges we face, God has a plan for us that is good and purposeful. This trust does not come naturally, especially when we encounter difficulties or when life takes an unexpected turn. But it is through these moments of uncertainty that our trust in God's plan is tested and strengthened. The foundation of trusting in God's plan lies in the understanding that He is sovereign over all things. He knows us intimately, more than we know ourselves, and He has designed a path for each of us that leads to a purpose far greater than we could ever imagine. This means that every experience we go through, whether joyful or painful, has a place in the bigger picture of God's divine purpose for our lives. When we trust in His plan, we are choosing to believe that even when we cannot see the end result, He is already there, orchestrating every detail for our good. In times of struggle, it can be difficult to understand why certain things happen, especially when they seem to contradict our desires or what we think is best for our lives. It is during these times that trusting in God's plan requires surrender. We may not always have the answers or the understanding, but we must hold on to the faith that God, in His infinite wisdom, knows what is best for us. His ways are not our ways, and His thoughts are higher than ours. This understanding can bring peace to our hearts when the world around us seems uncertain. Trusting in God's plan also means letting go of the need to control every aspect of our lives. As humans, we tend to want to manage everything, making decisions based on our limited understanding of the world. But God calls us to release this control and trust in His guidance. This can be a difficult step, especially when things don't unfold as we imagined. However, it is in surrendering to His will that we begin to experience His peace, knowing that He is in control, even when we are not. The beauty of trusting in God's plan is that it allows us to find hope, even in the midst of trials. When we face difficulties, rather than looking at them as obstacles, we can begin to see them as opportunities for growth, knowing that God is refining us through each experience. His plan includes moments of testing that shape our character and build our trust in Him. These challenges are not meant to break us, but to strengthen us, to help us grow closer to Him, and to prepare us for the greater things He has in store for us. Moreover, trusting in God's plan gives us the assurance that nothing is ever wasted. Even in moments where we may feel lost or that our efforts have been in vain, God uses every season for His glory and for our benefit. There is no part of our journey that goes unnoticed or unused by God. Every setback, every triumph, every tear, And every smile is woven into the tapestry of his plan for us. When we choose to trust in this divine orchestration, we align ourselves with God's greater purpose, stepping into a future that is full of hope and promise. Strength for the journey is a prayer that many of us find ourselves uttering, especially when faced with the challenges and uncertainties of life. Life is not always smooth. It is full of trials, obstacles, and moments of deep weariness. Whether it's the weight of responsibility, the pain of loss, the struggle of balancing personal and professional life, or the battle with inner turmoil, there are times when we feel overwhelmed. In these moments, we often wonder how we can continue on. And it is in these moments that we must call upon God to be our strength. For it is He who equips us to endure and press forward. The strength we seek for the journey is not a strength of our own making. As humans, we often try to rely on our own resources, our knowledge, our abilities, our determination. However, there comes a point when we realize that no matter how hard we try, we are limited. It is in these moments of realization that we must turn to God, acknowledging that His strength is perfect, especially in our weakness. The Bible reminds us in 2 Corinthians 12:9 that God's grace is sufficient for us, and His power is made perfect in weakness. When we are at our lowest, His strength is most evident, carrying us when we can no longer stand on our own. In seeking strength for the journey, we must also recognize that it is not just physical strength that we need. We need emotional, mental, and spiritual resilience to face the challenges ahead. God provides us with this kind of strength as well. Emotional strength to face our fears and uncertainties, mental strength to endure the struggles that come our way, and spiritual strength to remain anchored in our faith, no matter how stormy the seas of life may get. Each day, God is offering us the grace to rise above the burdens we carry and to trust that He will empower us to face whatever comes our way. The strength for the journey also comes through the understanding that we are not alone in our struggles. God promises to walk beside us, to never leave us or forsake us. This assurance that we have a constant companion, someone who understands our pain, who is present in our joy and sorrow, gives us the courage to keep moving forward. It is through His presence that we are empowered to keep going, even when the road ahead seems long and the obstacles insurmountable. As we journey through life, it's important to remember that strength is not always about the absence of weakness, but the presence of God's grace in our weakness. Strength for the journey is not about being invincible or unshaken, but about learning to rely on God's power to carry us through. It is in the midst of our trials that we discover the depth of His love for us, a love that will never fail, and a strength that will never run out. Through Him, we find the courage to face each day, knowing that with His strength, We are more than conquerors, no matter what the journey may bring. Gratitude and surrender are two powerful spiritual practices that, when combined, shape a believer's heart and transform their relationship with God. Gratitude is an acknowledgement of God's goodness in our lives, recognizing the many blessings that often go unnoticed. It is not just a polite thank you, but a deep, heartfelt appreciation for His constant presence and provision, even in the most difficult of times. Surrender, on the other hand, is the act of releasing control and trusting fully in God's plan, allowing His will to guide us instead of our own desires or plans. Together, gratitude and surrender create a profound sense of peace. A peace that transcends our understanding and carries us through life's challenges. Gratitude is the foundation of a life of surrender. When we are truly grateful for what God has done in our lives, we open our hearts to His will. Gratitude shifts our focus from what we lack to what we have. And this shift changes our perspective on life. It is easy to get caught up in the struggles, the setbacks, and the disappointments. But gratitude reminds us to look for the beauty in the midst of the mess. When we practice gratitude, we are training our hearts to recognize God's fingerprints in every situation. Whether it's in the quiet moments of peace, the challenges that stretch our faith, or the relationships that bring us joy. Surrender, however, is often a more difficult practice. Surrender means letting go of our need to control every aspect of our lives and trusting that God knows what is best for us. It's an act of humility where we acknowledge that we are not in control and that God's plans are far better than anything we could devise on our own. It's easy to hold tightly to our own plans, hoping that they will bring us peace and fulfillment. But true peace comes from releasing those plans to God, trusting that He will guide us toward His perfect will. When we combine gratitude and surrender, we find a deep sense of trust in God's sovereignty. Gratitude helps us to see His hand at work in our lives, while surrender allows us to accept His plan, even when it doesn't make sense. It's in surrender that we realize we don't have to have all the answers or know what the future holds. God's presence is enough for today, and His grace is sufficient to carry us through each moment. Gratitude and surrender are also acts of faith. In expressing gratitude, we are acknowledging that God is good, even when life doesn't seem to be. In surrendering, we are saying that we trust Him with everything. Our hopes, our fears, our dreams, and our future. This type of surrender is not passive. It requires action. It means choosing to trust in God's timing, even when we don't understand it, and accepting that He knows what is best for us. It is through this combination of gratitude and surrender that we experience true spiritual freedom. The freedom to live fully in the present moment without the burden of worry or the pressure to control outcomes. Ultimately, gratitude and surrender are two sides of the same coin. Gratitude opens our hearts to God's goodness, while surrender allows us to embrace His will with confidence. Together, they create a heart that is aligned with God's purposes. A heart that is at peace, knowing that no matter what comes, God is in control and His love for us will never fail.